Welcome back to the Leaders Lab podcast. I'm your host, Ken Eslick, and today we have Mr. Joe Woodhouse on. He is the founder of Family Wealth 101, and with 20 years of experience, Joe has helped countless families achieve financial success and security. Joe's direct and simple approach comes as a breath of fresh air in a jargon-filled industry and has gained him large following via his social media channels throughout the Middle East. As a family man and trusted financial planner, Joe provides expert guidance on a range of topics, including investing, estate planning, retirement planning, and much more. His mission is to empower families to take control of their finances and build lasting wealth for generations to come. Whether you're just starting your financial journey or you're a seasoned investor, Joe's insight and expertise can help you achieve your financial goals. Welcome to the Leaders Lab, Joe.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so good to have you here. I was telling you right before we hit play, I was on your website, and I know everything around you is family. And the first thing I saw when I went to your website was your twin boys, and you going over a study, I think, in interest, right? And paying interest, and why that's so, or actually it was inflation.
Inflation, yeah.
Inflation, and you were using candy and them taking away the candy. But I thought that was so cool. But before we get into all of that, can you tell me a little bit about your background and just growing up and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so I come from a traditional working class background in the north of England, and I fell into finance. So typical household, mum and dad. So my dad was and still is. My dad's a market trader. So my dad sells second-hand bric-a-brac in South Yorkshire in the north of England on the markets. And my mum she passed away 2 years ago, unfortunately. But when she was with us, she had various jobs working in schools, part-time working for the National Health Service. She worked at a steel company for a while, just like secretary, executive assistant type work. And it was a very traditional background where dad worked every hour on the planet, mum worked part-time, and basically looked after me and my brother, did everything for us. As a child, I boxed. So from being 11-year-old up until 21, I was an amateur boxer and I was obsessed with it. I had 43 fights and I wanted to be a world champion when I was growing up. I ate, slept, lived boxing. And I remember being about 12-year-old and my dad saying to me, "What do you want to do when you leave school?" So I said, "I want to box." And my dad's like, what do you really want to do? I'm like, "I want to box. I want to be a world champion." And he says, "Right, but what's your plan B?" And I remember saying to him, "Well, you seem to do all right. I'll just work on the markets with you." And it was the biggest mistake I ever made because it was coming up to the school summer holidays. And 2 days before the summer holidays started, my dad said, "Right, you're coming on the markets with me for the school holidays." And I said, "No, I want to go out and play on my bike." But my mate's like, no, I'll come on the markets with me. I'll pay you £9 a day. And I've always been a numbers man. So my brain very quickly went, my dad works 6 days a week as well.
Sure.
£9 a day, 6 days a week, 6 weeks. That's an Xbox.
Sure.
Yep, I'll come on the markets with you. So the first Monday morning, he got me up. We left the house at 4 a.m. So my dad's got this huge van. So we left the house at 4 a.m. in my dad's van, drove to the market, unloaded all the stuff onto the market stall, stood on the market all day, selling all this second-hand bric-a-brac that he gets. At the end of the day, loaded the van back up, drove home, unloaded the van, loaded the van back up again with tomorrow's stuff that we were going to sell. And we finished about 6:30, 7 o'clock. And my dad paid me my £9 salary in pound coins. So I'm like, "Right, thank you." Turns around to walk away. And he says, "Oh, Joe," he said, "because you're working now, you need to pay board money."
Oh, no.
And I said, what's board money? He went, "Rent." And I looked at him and he said, "Well, what do you think pays for the mortgage? What do you think keeps the lights on? What do you think keeps the water running? What do you think pays to wash your clothes?" I'm like, "Right." He said, "I need a third of your wage. So I need £3 back for board money." So I gave him, begrudgingly, gave him the £3. Turned around, storming upstairs. "Oh, Joe, how did you get to the market today?" And I said, "Well, in your van." He said, "Right, I need £2 petrol money." So gave him £2. So from his £9 that he'd given me, I was left with £4. So I were upset about that. So that was that. Went to bed. He woke me up again the next morning, 3:45. We're leaving the house. He said, "Oh, have you got yesterday's wages on you?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, what are you going to eat? How are you going to eat?" So I had to take the £4 wage to the market, and I had to buy myself breakfast, and I had to buy myself lunch as well. So I came out with about £1.50 a day.
Nice.
And that did two things. One is I worked out very quickly to befriend the ladies in the cafe who ran the cafe in the market. I used to go begging to them every day, saying my dad's not paying me. So they used to give me bits of free food. But I also worked out I didn't want to work on the markets. So it got to about day 3. And I said to my dad, "Oh, I don't want to come on the markets with you anymore." And he just went, "Tough, you're committed." And he dragged me there for the entire 6-week school holidays. I was netting about £2 a day, borderline child slave labor.
Right.
And at the end of the 6 weeks, he said to me again, "What do you want to do when you leave school?" And I said, "I still don't know, but I just know I don't want to work on the markets with you." So that worked. So flash forward to me leaving school. So at school, I always picked up retained information really well, but I was always quite disruptive, didn't like school. So it became this game of getting my work done as quickly as possible and stopping everyone else from doing theirs. And I enjoyed being the class clown and being the center of attention, as most teenage boys do. And it came to me leaving school at 15, 16, and I'd had it drilled into me that without A-levels and a degree, you're going to be a bin man or you're going to work on the markets with your dad. Neither I wanted to do. So I was going to college to further my education. I didn't want to go. I didn't particularly want to go to college. I didn't want to study any longer, but I'd had it drilled into me from a dad, my mum, from all my teachers that without A-levels, without a degree, you will amount to nothing. So this was the summer when I was about 16-year-old. And my mum and dad said, "Right, you need to go and get a job." And I said, "No, I'm going to college in September." They were like, no, you need to get a part-time job. So for a couple of weeks, they kicked me out of the house every day when they were going to work. I'd go and hide around the corner, wait till they went to work, came back, stayed in bed all day, or played on my Xbox, or did whatever I did at 15, 16-year-old. And that went on for a couple of weeks. And then my younger brother used to play soccer, or football as we call it, on a Sunday. And she came back one day and she said, "I've got you an interview at a bank." So it turns out one of the parents at my brother's Sunday league team was a bank manager. So I said, "Doing what?" She went, "I don't know." And she leant in, and her exact words to me, "Can I swear on this?"
Oh, of course.
Right, okay. She leant in and she went, "Do not fuck this up." So that was that. So then the following week, the branch was in in Sheffield city centre. So the following week, I took a friend with me. We went down to the town on the bus. And as we're walking around town, I said, "Right, I've just got a nip in here." So I took a friend with me to this interview. He sat in the banking hall. I went up to the front, asked for a lady called Julie Chant, who I now owe a lot to. And Julie came out. I'd never met her before. She came out and she took one look at me. She looked over my shoulder at my friend who was sat in the banking hall. She said, "Come here." She took me in an office, slammed the door behind me and said, "You listen to me. You drop this cocky attitude. I know you switched on. I've promised your mother I'm going to give you a job, and I'm giving you this job. If you lie to her, she'll know, because I'm going to ring her now and tell her. Now get the F out of my office." And she kicked me out. And I remember sort of walking out of the banking hall, and I just turned to my friend and I went, "I've got a job in a bank." And he said, "Doing what?" I still don't know.
And were you kind of I mean, I'm just picturing you as kind of happy-go-lucky, like, "Okay, mom, okay, dad, like, I'll do whatever, okay, fine," just kind of blowing them off so you could do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And both your mom leaning in, who it doesn't sound from your story like that was her normal MO, right? Like it seemed like that was a little bit out of character for her to finally, seemed like your dad seemed to be more the one telling you what you were going to do, but you had actually kind of pushed her to her limit as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't the easiest child growing up. Let's just put it that way.
Right,
I was
right.
very argumentative. I knew everything. I had an answer to everything. I was very borderline cocky as a teen. And
I can relate. I actually boxed as well. We can touch on that in a little bit. I don't think quite as much, but Yeah. So what happens next? So you're at the bank. She says you got the job. What is the job? What does that
Yeah,
turn into?
so I found out when I got there for my first day, the job was a cashier.
Okay.
So I started on Saturdays and then it sort of increased a few more days from there. But so I was a cashier and I just fell in love with it. And not the cashiering side. I was probably the worst cashier on the planet because my till was never correct at the end of the day. It never balanced. And but I think that's well, I know that's because I was just distracted. And what the bit I loved was the building relationships, was the sales side of it, the sort of selling to people, and the because this was back in the day when you go into the bank. It's a little bit different now, especially in the UK, because none of the banks have got sales targets anymore.
Yeah.
So back then, you'd go in the bank and the cashiers would be on you. Do you want your account upgrading? Can we get you in front of a manager? We can get you a better credit card. We can reduce the interest rate you're paying on your debts. We can increase the interest rate on your savings. And I used to get, as a cashier, every referral I passed on to the managers, every sale they made, I used to get paid £3. So I was sat there very quickly working out that, hang on, I can double or treble my salary just by doing these referrals.
Yeah.
And it just became a game. And I became obsessed with it. And it was literally to the point where you would not leave my till until you sat in front of a manager or you stormed out of the banking hall in disgust.
And you were like 21, 22 at the
No,
time?
16.
Oh, 16.
Yeah, I was
Jeez.
still 16, yeah.
Okay, wow.
But people would wait in the queue because they'd heard me pitch 5 people before them and they didn't want to get pitched. So they'd wait until one of the cashiers were. It got that bad.
It just reminded me of being at like a barber shop where you got the one guy that does all the fades and everyone wants to see him and everybody else's chair is open, but you're not going there, right? You're just
it was
like,
exactly the opposite. Yeah, nobody'd come to me.
Yeah.
But I just became engrossed in sales. And I remember buying this book called KISS, Keep It Simple Series, Guide to Sales. And it became a Bible. It went everywhere with me. It was like this thick, this wide. And I read it back to front so many times. And I became obsessed with it. And and then flash forward to started at college. And it came up to the first what we call half term, so the first break. So after about 6 weeks in the UK education, you get a week off. So it came up to that about October. And I remember sitting on this row of cashiers, and there was me and 5 or 6 of these middle-aged women who were also cashiers, who mothered me and were amazing. And I still speak to a lot of them today. They're absolutely fantastic. But one had got A levels, one had got a university degree, one of them had got a master's. And I was sat there thinking, you're here, you've got 20 years on there, and you're doing the same job as me, earning a lot less than me because I used to refer that many people on. I became the top cashier in the country for referrals, went on all these incentives, won all sorts of awards with it. So that got me thinking. And then I remember speaking to arguably one of my first mentors, a guy called Ian Twarwick, who was one of the top salesmen for the bank at that time. And he was in our branch. And I remember speaking to him. I said, can I come have a chat with you? He's like, yeah, of course you can. I said, what qualifications have you got? And I'll remember it like it was yesterday. He leant back, he got his toothpick in his mouth, and he leant back and he took this toothpick out and he said, son, when I was your age, I couldn't spell my fucking name. And then he opened his drawer and he pulled out this piece of paper and he threw this piece of paper at me. And I opened it up and it was his payslip. And it got more zeros on it than I'd ever seen in my entire life. And he said, what do you want to do when you finish college? I went, I want to do this. So he said, go to college tomorrow, tell them to shove it and start working here full time and I'll train you.
Wow.
And that's what I did. So I went into college the next day, packed him, then went home, actually it took me a week after I packed in to tell my dad. My dad still thought I would go to college because I was petrified of telling him, because like I said, I come from no one in my family had ever been to university.
Right.
And that was my dad. My dad came off like the roughest council estate in the north of England. Like he grew up with nothing. And my dad's life ambition was to get off of the estate, which he did, buy a house, what he did. So my dad did quite well for himself. But no one in my family had ever had a formal education. So my dad left school when he was 12. And I'm the eldest of 8 grandchildren. We've now got kids as well. But at the time, I was the oldest of 8 grandchildren, big family. I was going to be the first Woodhouse to ever go to university. My dad wanted me to be a barrister. And I remember telling my dad, and he was heartbroken. And bear in mind, we lived in the same house. My dad didn't look at me or speak to me for 3 months. Nothing.
Wow.
Because I was throwing my life away. Yeah, and then I started working at the bank, and then worked my way up, became account manager, senior manager, and then it took my dad when my dad started seeing me doing really well. I was earning more money than I can imagine at like 18, 19, 20 year old. And then it got to 20. Then when I was 22, I moved to Abu Dhabi. So I got offered a job, commission only job, working for an independent financial consultancy. So basically, I was going to be like the business development manager for a financial advisor, but just on commission. So no salary at all. And like I said, my dad was very much, you've thrown your life away without a formal education. But then I started doing really well at the bank. My dad then started coming around a little bit. As soon as my dad started coming round,
You're taking more risk. You're dragging him with you, but you just keep taking on more risk.
Pretty much,
and then you got to go grab him again.
Yeah, but my dad's very risk averse.
Yeah,
and I think that comes from the upbringing he's had, from his career. Because my dad's never had a salary. Because my dad's always been self-employed. He's been through the harsh winters, the bad years, the bad times, and I think he just wanted me to have a bit more security and shelter around me. And I remember when I was 22, I was like, Dad, I'm quitting the bank. He's like, what? I said, I'm moving to Abu Dhabi. He said, to do what? I'm like, hold on to your hat. To not get paid a salary. It's a commission-only job. And that was the same again. He's like, you've worked all these years. He said, you packed in college, you threw everything away, then you've managed to get it all back. You've worked for the last 6 years, you've worked your arse off, and you're going to throw it all away again. I'm like, no, but my dad couldn't see the potential with it. I'm like, no. And I tried explaining it. He just didn't get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when I was 22, I moved to Abu Dhabi. And then same sort of thing, like it just became numbers for me. So I got in this commission-only environment where it like the penny dropped. And for me, I was just sat there thinking, right, so hang on. So what you're saying to me is there's no limit to what I can earn. And two, if I work harder than him, I get paid more than him. If I work harder than her, I directly get paid more than her. If I come in the office half hour earlier every day and leave half hour later every day, and I take 15 minutes for my lunch instead of an hour, essentially I've got 6 days for every I've got 6 days for every 5 that you've got. So I'm getting an extra working day just by doing half hour here, half hour there, and 45 minutes there. And it just became numbers and maths to me. And I started doing really well. Then I stepped up, became an advisor myself. And again, just started earning like ridiculous amounts of money as a young lad, tax-free, because I was living in the UAE, in the Middle East, so I weren't paying any tax on it. And I went down this very sort of dangerous road of, I stopped looking at things as monetary value because I knew my numbers inside out. I knew exactly how many calls I needed to make to get a bum on a seat, how many bums on a seat to get a client. I knew what my average client size was. So I knew all my numbers. So I started looking at things like watches, like business class flights, like suites in 5-star hotels. I'm like, that, that's not X amount of pounds or dollars. That's just one more deal.
Right.
That's just half a deal. That's 2 deals. So I was buying things with a view of I'll just work a bit harder next week and make it back, which was all right because my bank account was still increased. It wasn't all right. It was a stupid thing to do. But I came down to earth with a bang. So my wife and I got married in 2014. And then we found out that we couldn't have children naturally. So we started going down the IVF route. And living in the Middle East, there's no financial support. There's no national health service. There's none of this. So it's you pay for it yourself. And I'm assuming most of your viewers are in the US. So, I mean, you're talking up to $20,000 per round of IVF. And it took 5 rounds of IVF before we were blessed with my 2 twin boys, Henry and Jasper. And going through that, I very quickly ran out of money. Right. And that for me, and initially I went into this victim mentality of why me? Why can't we have kids? And at the time I'd changed firms. We didn't get paid for 6 months at this new firm. It was in 2016 when the markets were low, and it was during the Brexit vote. So a lot of expats, like my client, my target market, if you like, my clients were leaving the region. So, right, why is everyone leaving? Why is the timing bad? Why is the market down? Why is this new company shy? Why can't we have kids?
And it was
And
really like the first time in your life, at least in your professional career, it seems like that any long lasting adversity had come your way, right?
yeah,
It seemed like everything you had tried, it was just like working, right? It's
yeah,
working, it's
yeah,
working, it's working. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, shit, nature's not even working now. We
yeah.
can't have kids on our own. And even to do it, it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever, right? And so what did that do to your psyche? Because it probably blew up your identity because I would think going into that, you were like, I'm like the wonder kid. I can do whatever I want. It's going to work out, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
why you're buying the
I were
first class
invincible.
flights. You're like, whatever. I could
Yeah,
buy a first class flight. I could probably fly a private jet if I felt like it because all I have to do is work a little harder and I'll pay for it, right?
yeah. And that was exactly it. I was invincible.
Yeah.
And then we came into this, and it was arguably like the toughest 2 years of my life because we were going through it it was all my and my wife in particular, like all my from the day we met, we've been together. Me and Laura have been together since I was 20, and all she ever wanted was a family.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that I couldn't give her. And just the look on her face every time it didn't work, it was heartbreaking. It was like the worst experience that I've been through. And it's something that I talk about quite a bit now, in the hope that it helps other people sort of
Yeah.
realize that you're not on your own. Because at the time I felt so alienated. And we were also at that age then, we got a really good circle of friends. We were the first couple to get married out of all our circle of friends. But then everyone else started getting married.
Kids. Yeah.
Everyone else started having kids. And it was like such a mixture of emotions because like when they knew what we were going through. So when they were falling pregnant, it was like they dreaded telling us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like bragging about
But it was like
something.
I could see the guilt in their
Yeah.
eyes, like when they were announcing they were pregnant, and I could imagine them sat at home having a conversation about
Yeah.
me and my
How do we
wife.
tell
Saying,
them?
"Look,
Yeah.
how are
Yeah.
we going to tell them?"
Yeah.
So that was really hard as well. And but it was only when, like I said, I really took stock, and like so with the money side of things as well, with this victim mentality. Why me? Why this? Why that? And I remember sat there one day in this huge 4-bedroom detached house, villa that we were renting with its own private pool. I had a housemaid. I had a full-time driver. We were flying business class flights everywhere. We were staying in all these ridiculous hotels. And it were only then that I then sat back and I worked out everything that I had earned as an expat since I moved to Abu Dhabi, and then how much I'd saved and got left. The simple maths that then told me how much I'd spent over that period. And that for me was a massive wake up call. And just look, I was telling people what to do with their life savings. I just weren't doing it myself.
Sure.
So that for me was a big wake up call on time to get your shit in order, Joe.
Right. I would think, I mean, part of, at least for me, back in those days too, of earning a lot, but necessarily not practicing what you preach, I think it's also because that invincibility mindset is always like, well, I can always do it tomorrow. Like, I'll just make it up later. It's no big deal. I got plenty of time left. Then all of a sudden it's like, boom, boom, boom. 2 or 3 things hit you that you can't control
Yeah.
and let you know there's bigger forces at work. So so that's around 2018?
Yeah. So that was what, 2016 to 2015 to 2018. So in 2018, we had the boys.
Yeah.
And again, that was like this bittersweet moment because we'd gone through all this. Laura fell pregnant with the boy. Laura got pregnant with the boys. We had the boys, and they were born June the 15th, 2018. And they were born and rushed straight off to intensive care. And it's normal for babies to lose weight in the first few days of them being born. One of my sons, Jasper, lost half his. Bear in mind, they were only £5 when they were born. Jasper lost half his body weight, and he was just continually losing weight. And they didn't know what was wrong with him. They didn't know what had like they couldn't work out what was. They were feeding him through tubes, yet he was still losing weight. Every time they gave him anything by mouth, it was just projectile vomit everywhere. These tiny little babies, and like they nearly died. And it turned out, so one of the consultants, who's now a really good friend, Dr. Akash, who again I've got a lot to thank him for. still speak to him today on a regular basis. He was one of the consultants in the neonatal intensive care unit, and he'd read this paper a few months before about this this thing called pseudo hypoaldosteronism, and it's how he described it in layman's terms to me was diabetes. What diabetes is for your blood sugar levels, imagine this is the same but for your salt levels.
Okay.
So the boys' bodies couldn't regulate the salt levels, so potassium. So because it couldn't regulate the potassium, basically it's impossible to gain any weight with this ailment that they got. So he found this specialist in the UAE at another hospital. He spoke to her. This was all unknown to me. Spoke to her. She said, right, do these blood tests. So he did these blood tests, sent her the results, and she went, yeah, they've got it. So she then she came down, I think it was from Dubai. She came down from Dubai to Abu Dhabi to see us and basically explained to us sort of what's happening. It's like they were on steroids from being born. They had to have salt in the milk. It was a tough 3 weeks while they were in there.
And I'm guessing you're still mostly self-funded, maybe not the hospital bills, but some of the other stuff, right? And
yeah, well, the majority of that, we had healthcare, so we've got healthcare,
okay.
so the majority of that was paid for. But yeah, that was a very testing time.
And when does it start turning around and align you a little more with the purpose that you're at now?
So we went through that, and then we lived out in Abu Dhabi at the time, and even though we lived in Abu Dhabi, I was flying in the region a lot. So I was flying back and forth to Saudi Arabia, to Kuwait, to Qatar, all over the place. And we decided to move back to the UK. So again, I was also massively overweight back then. So to put it in perspective, I'm 5'9", and at my worst, I was 120 kilo.
So wow. So that's like 265, I think, in pounds. It's 2.6.
Yeah,
265.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to give you guys, because it's normally we don't release a lot of video. When he said he's a boxer earlier, it looks like he could box right now at about, I'm guessing, 180 pounds. I don't know how tall you are. So
I'm heavier than that, but I'm into a lot of weight training now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So wow, so from 260 to you lost tons of weight in that time.
Yeah,
huh?
Yeah, wow. Yeah. But again, that was the same thing. I was just putting it off. I mean, you mentioned something earlier that I was just invincible. So I was always in very good condition. Moved to Abu Dhabi when I boxed until I was 21. Moved to Abu Dhabi when I was 22. I didn't drink until I was 21. Like, I didn't drink any alcohol ever until I was 21. And then we moved to Abu Dhabi at age 22 and started earning all this money. And they call it the Abu Dhabi Stone, because you go out there and it's drinking and it's going out to nice dinners and nice restaurants, and so it's a very lavish lifestyle there. So yeah. I was just putting weight on and weight on and weight on and weight on, and I kept kidding myself saying, "Oh, I can do it if I want to. I just don't feel the need yet." And I just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And when the boys were born, that for me was really, I don't want to be a fat dad. I want to see my kids grow up. I want to be able to kick a ball around in a park with them. So I'll start. Then they were in hospital. Then it was like, right, I'll start when they get home. Then we got them home and the sleepless night started. So then I'm like, right, I'll start when they're sleeping through the night. And I blinked and a year had gone. And then flash forward to the summer of 2019. And my wife said, look, I'm not happy in the Middle East anymore, because she said, look, I'm a single parent half of the week. I would much rather be a single parent back in the UK. Could you fly back and forth from the UK to the Middle East and sort of do it that way? We're in the UK now. And I said, well, we can try it. So we'll try it for 3 months, but I need you to promise me if it doesn't work, we're coming back. And she just went, yeah. Knowing what I know now, I don't think she ever had any intention of coming back.
Right.
So that happened. So we decided that, yes, we're going to give it a go going back. And then I got a phone call off my mum. My mum got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And doctors basically said, you've got 2 years to her. And that for me was the rocket up the arse that I needed for me to get my own health in order. It's because again, I had the view then of she's had her life taken away from her. I don't want to waste my chance. I want to see my children get old. I want to see my children grow up.
Right.
And call it fate, call it divine intervention, call it whatever you want. But literally, an hour after I got that phone call off my mum, I got a message on Facebook from a guy called James Goff, who was my first fitness coach. And it was a cold message, something on the lines that I help busy professionals lose fat, get more energy, get the life in order, be the best version of themselves for the kids. And I remember messaging him back straight away saying, I'm in. And he said, look, let's jump on a call. Let's have a chat. I'm like, James, I'm in. He's like, you don't even know how much it costs. I said, I do not care. Like, this is more important to me than money. Just send me the payment link. I'll pay you. I'm in. And that for me was when I got my health in order. So I then started a sort of structured plan, counting my steps, cardio daily, going to the gym. At the time, it was 3 days a week, resistance training, and I do 5 days a week. And really just sort of tracking everything and getting a routine and a system in place. And I lost pounds. I lost 40.
Do it in kilos. I'm good with the math.
I lost 40 kilo.
That's 88 pounds. That's a lot.
So I lost that in a year.
Wow.
Working with James, and it completely transformed my life. We then moved back to the UK in January 2020, and then to spend more time with my mum. And then COVID happened, which was a blessing and a curse, because I was flying when we came back in January. I was flying back and forth to the Middle East, 2 weeks in the Middle East, 2 weeks UK, 2 weeks Middle East, 2 weeks UK, and it was horrendous because it just. Because I'd been using Zoom for a year before anyone knew what Zoom were. Because I'd been trying to go down that route of working remotely. Sure. So I knew it inside out, upside down, on its head, but trying to get my clients to use it,
right?
Especially clients that have been used to seeing the whites of my eyes, me buy them a coffee and shake my hand for the last 5 years, that was where the struggle came. So I'd be trying to arrange client meetings on Zoom, and all I'd ever get was, when are you out here next? Oh, it's going to be 3 weeks yet. Don't worry, Joe, I'll wait. I'm not in a rush. Which obviously doesn't help me and my targets and my bills and everything else. And what that then meant was these 2 week trips in the Middle East, I was doing 20-hour days. It was insane. I was doing 20-hour days, not sleeping. And it also meant that if a meeting cancelled that was supposed to be business towards the back end of the trip, I then can't see that person for another 2 or 3 weeks.
No money.
So it would just, the stress around that was horrendous. I'd be vile to be around like 3 or 4 days leading up to a trip because I didn't want to go. And then I'd get back from this trip and I'd be a zombie for 4 days.
Right.
So the 2 weeks I was back in the UK, I may as well have just stayed in a hotel down the road because I was no use to anybody. And then COVID happened. And then overnight, everyone got used to working on Zoom. Everyone had no other way of communicating. So it really did act for the better. It transformed my business because now we do most things remotely.
Trained your clients to be what you needed them to be for you to have the lifestyle you needed to have. I mean, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And did your mom pass early on and sorry about that, by the way.
No, it's okay. No, thank you.
Early in COVID or
no, so it was March 2021. My mum passed away, March the 8th.
Okay.
So, and that was another difficult thing with COVID because my mum, and I understand it, but again, even early doors, I remember when we first found out about COVID and you were seeing the videos of the Chinese people dropping dead in the streets, and you were, granted, we now know a little bit more about it. But I mean, I remember when it first started kicking off, I take my dog and we couldn't leave the house other than for 1 hour a day or whatever the rules were back then in the UK. There's a field across the road where I take the dogs walking. It got in my head that much. I remember going across to that field and there's a gate, and I remember putting one of the dog's pool bags on my hand to open the gate so I didn't have to touch anything. And like when it was bad, but my mum had the attitude of, I do not give a shit. I am dying. I want to see my grandchildren. And I understand it from her point of view. But then on the flip side, me and my wife had the view of, I couldn't imagine if I gave something to my mum and she died prematurely, I'd never be able to live myself. So we had a lot of battles with my mum on this, that she got that attitude of, I don't care, I just want to see you. And we were trying to fight back, saying, look, we can't, like, we can't risk it. We can't risk your health. So that was difficult. And then in March 21, my mum, she had breast cancer, but it was very aggressive, triple negative, something or other breast cancer, it was called, like quite a rare form. And by the time they found it, it was in her bones, it was everywhere. And she went in, I can't remember which organ it was, but it reached one of her organs, and she was going into the hospital in March 21 to have this organ removed. While she was in there, caught COVID, and unfortunately never came out.
Wow. So that's so rough, but it's interesting because I'm sure her influence and your dad's influence combined with your wife's desires and your desires is what made you guys try so hard to have the family that you have now. And and it
Yeah,
was
and one
also
thing,
her diagnosis, I think, that gave you the leverage to get healthy and be the father that you are now. And how did all that come together combined with this train wreck that was COVID that also had some benefits for you guys, right? In terms of how it shaped your business and stuff. What does that look like now?
yeah, that now life's very good.
Yeah.
But when my mum passed away, I went through a really dark few months. I couldn't, knowing what I know now and working on myself, I know it's always been there, but I've never handled my emotions really well.
Right.
But when my mum passed away, I don't know whether it was anger, whether it was a mixture of everything, but I'd be walking across the field with the dogs, not particularly thinking about my mum or thinking about anything sad, but just bursting into tears. I'd be like a horrible dad to the kids. I'd be like really aggressive. I'd be arguing with my wife over stupid things, but like really aggressive fights, verbal fights. And I just couldn't bottle anything in. So I remember at the time, so in the summer of 2021, I reached out to a couple of therapists. And I don't know whether I was going into it with the wrong attitude, but it just didn't work for me. And one thing that I think I've got, and I've always had, is quite a sharp mind. I'm very good at problem solving. I enjoy solving problems. And I've realized what I see as common sense, a lot of people don't. And I didn't want to lose that edge. And so the first thing I was going into these meetings, these therapists saying is, do not prescribe me any drugs.
Right.
Like, do not give me anything. I will not take it. Now, right, and I'm not poo-pooing medication for sort of depression or antidepressants, anything like that. But I just personally, it might be a very ignorant view, but I'd seen what they did to my dad when my mum got diagnosed with cancer. Like, they turned him into a zombie. I saw what they did to my mum when my granddad passed a few years before.
I think you also knew that this hadn't been going on forever. This had been a reaction to some, you know what I mean? Like, this has been a lifetime thing. Maybe it's something to talk about, but this had been a reaction after many traumas that happened to be ended by your mom's passing, right? So, or compounded by your mom's passing, right?
Yeah. But again, both of them, like, straight away just tried prescribing me drugs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I felt also, I've always been quite a tough love person. I don't want mollycoddling. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. And what I found personally with these therapists was that they were excusing my behavior. So I remember one in particular, I went into I'd had a massive argument with my wife in the morning and I called her a vile word. And then I remember going into this meeting with this therapist and telling her what I'd said. And she said, well, but you need to think about the circumstances that led to that. And I'm like, no, what led to that is me being a knob. She's like, yeah, but you need to look at what's happened to you, for you until this point. How does that make you feel and all this? And I just found that everything I said, that I had done what was like unforgivable, they were excusing my behavior.
Yeah.
And it was like they were trying to feel sorry for me. And it just, for me, I didn't gel with them at all.
I think you wanted straightforwardness and discipline and direction, and you were
Yeah,
getting like
I've always
coddling and excuses
Yeah.
and bullshit.
Yeah, I've always been very logical. And I've always said, look, if you cannot explain something to an 8-year-old, you don't really understand it yourself.
Right.
And that's a philosophy that I've taken through my entire career. And so that happened. And so I've got rid of both of these therapists, which I couldn't gel with at all. And I listened to an audiobook in August of 2021 called Paul Mort Will Save Your Life. And the author, a guy called Paul Mort, he's a coach in I'll not call him a life coach because he goes mad when anybody calls him that. He hates it. But he coaches people, and his tagline is helps people get the shit in order. And I reached out to Paul and started working with Paul, and Paul was exactly what I needed at that time. He'd been through it. He'd been through depression. He got diagnosed with bipolar. Not that I ever got anywhere like this, but he tried committing suicide. But then he got his life in order, then started coaching other people how to do it. But it was very logical and very step by step. Do this, then this, then this to feel like this. And that for me worked really well. So I've been working with Paul now for the last two years.
Last name is Mort?
Mort, yeah.
Okay,
Paul
cool.
Mort.
I was just making a note. Cool.
But yeah, like it's amazing. But again, he's from the north of England. He's had.
Are you up near like Newcastle or where?
Am I? No, I'm in Yorkshire. I'm South Yorkshire. Paul's from near Newcastle.
Okay. I'm not there. I've got friends out there. I got a guy I work with. So I was just in Newcastle in July. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. So the outcome of that is he helps you get out of your funk. It was funny because you were telling me about the therapist. I'm like, I wonder if a guy like you was looking for more of a coach, and then the coach appeared, right? And so and then tell me about the last couple of years and how that's come together for you.
Yeah. So look, I'm really big on routine. So I've now sort of come to realize that sort of I personally find a lot of free, and it sounds really strange when I say this, but I find so much freedom in structure and routine.
I just got done talking. I swear to God, not to interrupt you. I just got done talking to a group of people. I mean, literally right before our call, I hung up on a Zoom meeting, and it's a group that I coach, and I was talking to them, and I was showing a snapshot of like my routine and my calendar. And I said, I know some people look at this and it freaks them out because it looks like the Matrix. I said, but what you don't understand is that there's lots of flexibility in this. And some people ask me, like, don't you ever just make time to stop and smell the roses? And I said, yes, it's built into there. But here's the thing. You can never enjoy the roses if all of this shit is still running around in your head. Like, the only thing that can give me peace is to know that I'm on top of things. If you want to stop, especially if you're self-employed, if you want to be done working at 4 p.m., take Fridays off, take 2-week vacations, then do it. Schedule it. My point is just like during the time that we have, be intentional. If you're supposed to be playing with the twins, play with the twins and be all in, right? Like it's what's maddening to me, and I'm not saying this about other people. I get mad at myself when I waste time. It's probably I hate it.
Yeah. But again, I'm smiling, I'm laughing because that is exactly me.
Yeah.
So like I say, everything, most people look at my schedule and think it's like a military operation.
Yep.
Everything's in there from every, because I take my training and nutrition really serious now.
Yep.
So I eat 6 times a day. That's in my diary.
Yep.
My cardio's in my diary. My gym sessions are in my diary. My walks are in the diary. The time I get up's in the diary. Like I say, the school pickup, the time I've got with the kids is in the diary. Like everything is scheduled in. Yeah. And for me, I have a saying that's like 6 P's. So proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
Totally.
And for me, organization is at the heart of everything that I do. And one of the things that me and my wife do, which has been a game changer for us, is we have a family meeting every Sunday night. So when the kids, and we'll bring the kids into this when they get a bit older, but when the kids are in bed on a Sunday night, we sit down with my schedule, Laura's schedule, and we map out the entire week. So we put in there my school pickups and drop-offs, her school pickups and drop-offs, my gym sessions, her gym sessions. I know where she's doing, where she is. I know what jobs she's doing. She knows what jobs I need to do. We always put a date night or a date day in every single week, even if it's just a coffee for an hour. Yeah. Try and find time for ourselves every single week, and we schedule everything in. And again, a lot of people laugh at me when I tell them that for me, that's the most important meeting of the week, because once it's in the diary,
all the people laughing about it are typically the same people that are wondering why they can't get everything done that they want to get done. I mean, the other thing they share with this group, or talked about this group with, and again, sometimes I have to take my own logic. I'm not saying I'm always perfect at this stuff.
Oh, likewise, yeah.
Oh, yeah, always a work in progress. But, you know, it's pretty funny. If you take most really successful people that you or I know, and you put all of us in a group and you IQ tested everybody, there's not going to be that massive, unless you throw an Elon Musk in there or Steve Jobs or somebody that's just really, really creative. you're not going to find a massive difference in the IQ scores of these business owners and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So why can one person run a, you know, struggle to make, 50 grand a year, and another person can run a $500 million company, no problem, or be on the board of three more at the same time, and seems to be able to have time for his family, his kids, his health, and everything else? What is that? And I think it's all about intention and how they leverage their time. And I think there's a big mistake with entrepreneurs that the whole idea of being your own boss, in most people's mind, you say, what do you want to do? They say, I want to be my own boss. Why do you want that? Because I want freedom. How do you define freedom? Doing what I want when I want to do it. Well, that's not being your own boss. like being a correct version of being your own boss, especially before you become independently wealthy, is knowing when you're in your best state of mind, how to guide yourself when you know you're not going to be in your best state of mind. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, when you're supposed to go for a run or a walk or whatever you're supposed to do, you might not feel like doing it. But if it's in your diary, you're doing it because you told yourself to do it. You directed yourself to do it. But that's what being your own boss is to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I try and do as well within my business is time is my most precious commodity.
Yeah.
So I protect my time and my energy at all costs. And so what I now do is I try and run my business and my life around just doing things that I want to do.
Yeah.
And anything that I've not got the time, the energy, the interest, or the knowledge to do, I just outsource it.
Yeah.
So like part of my business, what I despise is admin. Fucking hate admin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I've got my assistant Jess. She's fantastic. She basically runs my life. She sorts all that. I've got Ryan who manages my diary, my schedule. He manages all that side of things for me. So they take a lot off my plate. Like all the social media content I produce, that all gets outsourced. I love making videos. I love producing the content. But I couldn't think of anything worse than sitting and trying to edit it. I couldn't do it anyway.
Clip it.
Like trying to edit it and put it together, and that doesn't interest me. So that all gets outsourced. And I'm saying, like I said, with my fitness, I've got my fitness coach. I've got the company that makes my meal prep. So I just try and make my life as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And the amount of things I reduce that I've got to, like you mentioned it yourself, that the amount of things I reduce that takes my brain power away means I can just focus on doing the things that I'm good at and what I enjoy doing.
Right. I don't think people think about that enough. Like what is occupying your bandwidth and why. So tell me about your business now and how our listeners, because do you work with people all over the place, or are your clients primarily in the Middle East, or like what?
Primarily in the Middle East.
Tell me about working with you.
Yeah, so primarily in the Middle East. So I help expats in the Middle East mainly with savings and financial planning advice.
Okay.
So it's basically protecting the family now and in the future. And so I'm a financial planner by day. But I suppose what makes me sort of different is that I was, especially in the region, I was one of the first to start creating content around this. And I've always been a massive, like I said, I've always been a massive fan of just keeping things as simple as possible. And I get a lot of feedback from my clients. Look, my industry is full of jargon. So the financial services industry is full of jargon, it's full of bullshit, it's full of noise. And I've always been very good at cutting through all that and just breaking it down into plain English, into a language that people like you and I understand. And like I said, look, if you can't explain something to an 8-year-old, you don't really understand it yourself.
Totally.
And I started making videos, 6-7 years ago now, around these financial topics. And it's grown from there. But when I started making the videos, I got a lot of hate and a lot of backlash from people within my industry.
Oh yeah, because they're hanging their identity on, the more complex it is, then the more stature maybe they can feel around it, right? Like what I do is important and it's really hard to understand and And they're like, no, wait a minute, I'm going to have my two-year-old twin boys, eat candy off a table so I can describe to you how inflation works when your money sits around doing nothing, right? And it's like, well, when you explain it that easy, it makes them feel less than. And I think what you're trying to do is just make it accessible to more people and understandable by more people. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not frightened of laughing at myself either, which again, my industry is very stuffy. It's very snooty. Us financial advisors, we think we're better than everybody else and we know more than everybody else and we talk down to everybody every day. And I think one of the things that really resonates with my audience and sort of how I've got the following that I've got is I'm not frightened of laughing at myself. And I try and bring as much humor into the videos as possible. I make a lot of skits poking fun at the industry. And again, the reason I do that is I'm always been a believer of, look, if you're laughing, if you're smiling, if you're enjoying the content that you're consuming, you're going to retain more information and you're going to learn more. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I love watching your videos. That's how we ended up on here. And so
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking this.
No,
I
no,
had a
likewise.
couple other questions for you before you go.
Yeah, of course.
Is is it still a good time for expats to head over to the Middle East? I mean, I know it's been a huge trend the last, especially decade or so, and you've been there at the forefront of that really the whole time, if not
Yeah.
longer. Is it still as advantageous as it seems? Are there drawbacks in general that obviously there's cultural stuff and will your family enjoy it? And you've dealt with some of that personally, but from a pure play monetary tax purpose, is heading to the UAE still as nice as it seems in terms of monetary savings?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's an amazing place,
Yeah.
and I think one of the reasons it sort of exploded again is
Mm-hmm.
how they dealt with COVID. So through the pandemic, Dubai was one of the first places on the planet to open its doors to tourism again. It was one of the first places on the planet to open its doors and basically people are welcome here. And what you found on the back of that, there was a lot of people that were fed up with the situation in Europe, in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in all these other countries, quote unquote developed countries, that moved their businesses, that moved to the UAE. And the UAE is a very pro business place as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they've brought in VAT, they've brought in corporation tax, which to be fair has been a long time coming. But it's very, very cost effective for businesses to run.
Right.
And what I'm finding is you're getting more, say, location independent businesses
Yeah.
moving out
Remote
to,
remote businesses. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You're getting more and more of those moves to the UAE. And like I said, the tax breaks you can get there is insane. And it's a great lifestyle.
Yeah.
But one of the pitfalls, what a lot of people, expats fall into, and again, this is so everyone you ever ask, why are you living in the UAE? It's always monetary reasons,
Mm-hmm.
to save more, to invest more, to earn more. It's tax free, to make a better life for my family, to retire 5 years earlier, whatever it may be. But it's always monetary reasons. Yet 60% of expats actually leave the UAE in a worse financial position than when they got there,
Why? Spending too much while they're there or what? Yeah.
keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
I call it the expat trap because
Yeah.
it's very easy to spend money in the UAE.
Yeah.
It literally is an adult's playground. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and it never sleeps. So again, it's one of the biggest pitfalls there that a lot of people do get sucked into this expat lifestyle and trying to keep up with the next door neighbors and everyone else.
I have my first trip out there in a couple of months, so I'm looking forward
Oh,
to it.
cool. Oh,
Yeah,
nice. Where are you going?
Dubai.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, for a conference. But anyway, man, really great to meet you. I love
Yeah,
hearing about
likewise.
your story. Thanks for your vulnerability and sharing around your family and conceiving and your mom and all of that, because it's really, I mean, we just try to get the story of great leaders on here, and I think the vulnerability and the honesty that when people share like you did, I mean, it just helps other people, do better in their own journey. So thanks so much for being on. It was great to
No,
meet you.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Take care.
Bye bye now.
Bye.